afternoon. My name is Gail Golman Holtzman, and I am a partner at Taylor English Duma. Thank you so much for joining our conversations with Ted today. The focus of our conversation today is on a very timely topic, that is the 4-day work week. And just a little background information about me. I have been practicing labor and employment law for 38 years. It's hard to believe. And I started my career in Washington, D.C. I clerked for the National Labor Relations Board and then joined a firm there and wound my way down to Tampa, Florida, and had the privilege of working with so many employers on all aspects of labor and employment law, including advising employers on various policies, drafting those policies, and conducting investigations, particularly during the Me Too movement on discrimination and harassment, and really all aspects of the employment relationship. And I am so pleased today to be joined by my partner, Manori Silva. And Manori, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Gail, thank you very much for your kind introduction, and it's great to be on this podcast today. My name is Manori Silva. I'm a partner here at Taylor English, and I have been practicing law for about 17 years. I do a mix of commercial law and employment law, and my bread and butter are small to medium-sized businesses.
So my first question for you, Manori, a recent study says 79% of U.S. employees think that a 4-day work week would improve their mental health. 82% say it would make them more productive. What's the biggest takeaway from these results?
I think the growing trend, which was excited by what we saw during the COVID pandemic, is that flexibility is key, and employers need to think about being flexible because people are shopping around, employees are shopping around, and if flexibility isn't important to the employer, they will lose out on good talent because there are a growing number of companies that are offering flexible working, and many of them who would not have thought about flexible working before the pandemic were forced to think about it because it was a choice between remote working or closing down. And they discovered that, yes, there might be ways that they could carry on business and operations while having flexible and remote working.
What do you think the impact has been on productivity, Manori?
I think that the general consensus is that many of the fears that managers had, which was, if I don't see you, I don't trust you're going to do the job, that was pretty much unfounded, and that many people found it more productive. Now, that's obviously somewhat of a generalization. If you are a parent with small children at home and you had to work from home and the schools were shut, maybe it wasn't as easy to produce your reports as it would have been had you been going to the office and had kindergarten been open. But there are many other people who have reported that they were more productive because they were generally just happier. They could go take the dog for a walk, they could go to the gym, they could work at midnight if they wanted to, and they did not waste time on a commute. So I definitely think the people for whom remote working has been a eye-opener, they're never going to go back to the office full time.
So let me ask you, how do you think the changes to a 4-day work week and these circumstances help with employee burnout that we've read about?
I think that the research is showing, as you pointed out in the beginning, that flexibility is paramount, and it's actually people have raised this question about unlimited PTO, and in fact the research I've seen shows that having flexibility is the most important thing, and a 4 work day week is one of those things. And I grew up in Europe. It's been the norm for many parts of Northern Europe to have a 4-day work week, and in many industries nobody raises an eyebrow at all if you ask for 4 days in a week. It's just not a problem. And so in that sense, we're going to have to learn a little bit more about, not being quite as skeptical towards it as we might think we need to be. It is actually fairly proven that, if you give employees a bit more trust that they will produce the goods ultimately, then asking them to sort it out in 4 days is fine. Now, obviously, some jobs can't be performed in 4 days, but again, that comes back to the analysis of have I looked at the job criteria? Have I looked at what I expect the deliverables to be? But giving the 4-day week is something that I think will also be here to stay in many industries. It comes back again to making employees feel like they have somewhat of a control over their life, really. And if the bottom line for an employer is that they can't pay $10,000 more, then certainly looking at flexible working is something that they can use to try and nevertheless attract talent, because people do like to have 3 days off. It means that they can go on a long weekend somewhere. And some people, for example, they take the Wednesday off, and that makes it much more palatable. Let's say they only have to work 3 days in a row at the most. And so at the end of the day, we come back to the same question. If you're producing the results on time, who really cares where you're doing it and when you're doing it?
Manori, I have another question. Flexibility obviously is important for everyone, and you talked about the impact on Gen X, but do you think it's particularly important for women based on what your experiences with the companies you've worked with?
Absolutely. And I think, Gail, I'm sure you agree with me that the data shows that women still, by and large, are the caregivers at home for those who have elderly parents, but mainly those who have children. If you have the type of job where meetings are scheduled during the day when you're trying to look after your children at home as well, then maybe working from home isn't going to help you that much. But if you are in a type of role where you can look after your children during the day, and you can do a bit of work in the morning or some in the evening, and that's what you want to do, then absolutely having that option of flexibility and remote working will help women who do want to carry on their career as well as spending time with their children.
For employees who want that type of flexibility, what do you think the best way is to approach that with their employer?
I think it's going to have to be on a case-by-case basis, depending on the kind of relationship they have with their employer. I mean, if you do not get on with your boss and you don't particularly like the company, you might take a very clinical approach and just ask HR, what is your remote working policy? On the other hand, if you have a good relationship with your supervisor and the company generally, then I think it can be a much less formal dialogue, just asking how is the company going to approach remote working generally going forward, and in that way testing the waters to see where are the limits. But I don't think it's something that most companies are going to try and shut it out completely. I mean, we do read the headlines on some companies that require everybody back in the office all the time, but they tend to be the kinds of companies where they attract a certain type of person anyway. So I'm not sure that you can apply how those companies react across the board. I would say if you don't ask, you're not going to get it anyway.
Are there other benefits that you think employers should think about beyond the 4-day work week, perhaps, to try to retain employees, or that you're seeing employers looking at right now?
I think Honestly, the most important thing is flexibility, and the fact that there is a group of employees in the workforce who have a very different outlook on what a job means and what a career means. And they want to be able to focus on things that they consider important to them. And it's not always the salary at the end of it. It is the freedom to maybe travel and work from abroad for a while, and be flexible in their hours, and also just not have to be in the office if they don't want to be, and have healthcare benefits, for example. That's an old walnut, but it's still important. So I think what we've learned over the past 2 years is that sometimes the old school things that we thought might matter to people, like prestige or branding, are not necessarily as important as freedom to choose when you work and where you work.
Well, Manori, I thank you so much for all of your insights and sharing your time and talent based on all of your experiences. I think we'll look forward to seeing kind of an emerging different workplace, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this develops. But thank you so much, and I hope that everybody will watch our next conversation with Ted. But thank you so much for joining us, and Manori, thanks again.
Thank you
Gail
very much, Gail.
Holtzman with Taylor English, and it's been a pleasure to be with you this afternoon.